one of the biggest games of the entire season. We have Ohio State on the road at Michigan. Michigan is a 3.5-point home favorite. This game carries an over-under of 46 points. Seems like a pretty low total for the kinds of games we've been getting between these two rivals here. This game kicks off at noon Eastern on Fox, and of course it is the game. The winner advances to the Big Ten championship game, just as the college football gods intended. This is the third straight top 5 matchup between these two, the third straight with the division on the line, and the third straight, or so we thought, with the college football playoff on the line. At least at the time of kickoff, they're fighting for playoff spots. There is not a better rivalry in sports right now. You can go ahead and say, this is my favorite. Absolutely. Love Bedlam. Love the Iron Bowl. But in terms of high-level competition and what's on the line every single year, Ohio State and Michigan, nothing beats it. Extra intrigue this year, though. We all know about the Harbaugh saga and Connor Stallions and all that, but at least Michigan gets to handle this at home in a friendly environment. If they would have had to go on the road in Columbus, that would have been one of the more hostile, I think, environments that we've ever seen. It's going to be really chilly, as it usually is for this. Temperatures are going to be hovering right around freezing. As we've talked about in the past, that people have talked about, Ohio State isn't exactly the same track stars that they are in fairer weather with the team that they built. I don't know if that's the same case with this team this year, but in the past couple of years when they've had to play Michigan in cold weather, it doesn't go very well. The current issue for Michigan, though, starting tackle Ladarius Henderson, he did not play last week. It sounds like he's optimistic to go this week, but definitely keep an eye on that. He's a very big part of this, and the problem is the Michigan offensive line has been struggling in pass protection. J.J. McCarthy was pressured 8 times on 23 dropbacks against Maryland, and he had his worst game of the year by far. They also allowed 17 pressures against Purdue. No offense to your Boilermakers there, Kelly, but not exactly a ferocious pass rush. And half of McCarthy's dropbacks were under pressure against Penn State. And of course, Ohio State features one of the best pass rushes in the country, particularly along the edges. There are 2 other injuries of note, wide receiver Roman Wilson, defense back Miles Hinton. They should both be good to go, but it is worth monitoring them and Henderson this week. Michigan has been fairly static. I think last week was a lot of a look-ahead spot on the road. If you looked at my upsets article, Michigan was in there, and I didn't mean upset outright, but to go into College Park and play Maryland when you have Ohio State on tap, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a look-ahead spot there, and it did, turned out to be the case. But Ohio State, I think, has proved a lot, especially offensively lately. And you're looking at second halves, they're really putting their foot down. Now, there is a question. Is that just talent winning out against the Minnesotas and the Rutgers and them? Maybe. Yeah, definitely could be. I'm going to go much further in depth in this game at thelines.com. You can find my article posted here soon, but I don't have time for that kind of detail on this podcast. Otherwise, we'd be here for an entire hour. So, Kelly, I'm very interested to know what your numbers say about the game.
First, Brett, my watchability scores article due to the short week was scrapped this week, so I am not writing about the Ohio State-Michigan game, so I'm going to have a few more notes on this one. I promise I won't have this many for every game, but as you mentioned, given the magnitude of this game for college football fans, for the Big Ten race, for the CFP, for me personally invested in this game, I have a little bit more. So this game, you said it's the game. It does have a watchability score. I'm not writing about it, but I'm still putting it out what it is. 9.9 out of 10. It's the number 1 game of the entire regular season by this metric. Brett, as a college football fan, I, and really most people I would think, could not be more excited for this game. It's hard to have something with more stakes, I would think. But as an Ohio State fan, I could not be more nervous for this game, Brett. Before I get into the predictive analytics, I just want to look really quickly at these resumes. I know the committee has Georgia number 1. I'd actually have the Bulldogs number 3 in my most deserving. I've talked about that at length previously. You can go read the articles or listen to things to see what that's all about. Because of that, Ohio State and Michigan grade out as my number 1 and number 2 most deserving teams. So these are the 2 teams I think that have the biggest gripe right now at the committee because of their love for the Georgia Bulldogs. Michigan is number 2 in my most deserving rankings for the second week in a row. The Wolverines are number 6 in my record achievement metric. There's only a 5% chance that the average top 25 team would be undefeated against Michigan's schedule. What's even more impressive than that, the Wolverines are number 1 in my relative scoring margin metric. They're outscoring their opponents by 14.5 points per game more than would be expected of the average top 25 team against Michigan's schedule. But Ohio State can do them one better. This is my number 1 team in the most deserving rankings. They've been there for 5 weeks now. The Buckeyes are number 2 in my record achievement metric, and they're number 3 in my relative scoring margin metric. The winner of this game will be my number 1 most deserving team heading into the conference championship game weekend. The question is, will the committee move them to number 1 as well? That's for another day. For now, let's look at the predictive metrics for this game because they are off the charts. Ohio State might be number 1 in the most deserving, like I said, but it's Michigan that tops the power ratings now for a 5th consecutive week as well. And for the first time, Brett, since 2018, yes, 2018, my model makes Ohio State an underdog in a regular season game. Dude, it's been since pre-COVID by a year plus that Ohio State was a regular season underdog by my numbers. Yes, they've lost some regular season games during that time, only a few, but they've lost some. They were never a projected underdog by my numbers. I have Michigan minus 3.5. It's a 61% win expectancy. Michigan has the nation's number 1 defense. Ohio State's defense is number 2. Michigan has the nation's number 6 offense. Ohio State's is only, and I kind of put that in air quotes, number 17. It is interesting to note that is the lowest I've had this Ohio State offense ranked all year. So you could say that they are not playing their best football right now, or you could say, Kelly, you had them too high to begin the year. Either one's probably valid, but they're number 17 right now. For the model, that discrepancy right there, plus the fact that this game is in Ann Arbor, is the difference in this game. That's for the model. For me as a fan, admittedly, I am a biased one here. Again, the model doesn't see any of this stuff, but I am a college football fan. I am an Ohio State fan. Take that for what it's worth with these next comments. I actually feel better about Ohio State in this game than I did about last year's game, which was in Columbus, and the Buckeyes were a favorite by my numbers and by Vegas, if I remember correctly. I just feel like Ryan Day learned a lot about how to call a game with, I'll call it measured aggression against Georgia last year. And Kyle McCord is not C.J. Stroud, but I do think there are instances in which Day can kind of dial it up for Marvin Harrison and the other Ohio State skill players. You talked about the weather. That's going to hinder it. But I still think what Day learned last year about how to be aggressive in spots and to really just go for it, I think that's going to serve him well in this game. We haven't really seen him play like that against Michigan since pre-COVID. On the defensive side, Jim Knowles has taken a different approach this year. He said as much. He isn't going for the knockout blows on third down. He's not trying to get the big play turnovers or the sacks. He's just sitting back, giving you nothing over the top, and daring an offense to beat his team play after play consistently down the field without making mistakes. No one's been able to do it yet. Michigan will be the biggest test of the season for sure on this front. We'll see if it pays off. I don't know, but I don't think Ohio State's going to get burned with the big plays against Michigan as they have in years past in this rivalry. Bottom line, the model has Michigan minus 3.5. It's a 39% chance that Ohio State earns its first win in the game since 2019, Brett. Remember, they didn't play in 2020, and Michigan's won 2 straight.
A couple of injuries on the Ohio State side, too, that I want to talk about, specifically on defense. Defensive tackle Mike Hall, he's one of the best players, best run stopper, really good pass rusher. He missed last game. I do believe he does play Saturday. Tommy Eichenberg as well, their All-American linebackers, a little bit dinged up. Josh Proctor did return to action. Lathan Ransom kind of stepped in. The safety stepped in, did not play all that much. But if they have all these guys back, which I anticipate they do, I think a lot of the holding them out against Minnesota or limiting their snap count was a lot too. Hey, let's get you healthy for our bigger game here. I do like the style of play that Ohio State's been able to do this year. I think it counters what Michigan does better than the air it out, more finesse that they were trying to do last year. And, of course, the defense is not where it's at today, last season. And I think that really shows when you look at the two teams' games against Penn State. Michigan was a little bit, they were unable to move the football as effectively as normal against Penn State. I think Ohio State actually did a better job moving the football. So I do think I'm going to take Ohio State with 3.5 because we are getting that extra hook. It's a lower total game. The Buckeyes have not allowed more than 17 points to anybody this year. And I'm not saying that they're going to hold Michigan to 17 or less. I don't believe that's the case because this is large by far the best offense that they've faced all season. But, Penn State held them to 24, maybe looking in that range there. And then Michigan's run-exclusive game plan in the second half against Penn State, look, that's not going to fly here. Michigan is able to push and get drives against Penn State. I believe they were missing Chop Robinson still that game, and they're really able to move the ball and bully it. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Ohio State's defensive front, assuming that Mike Hall is in the game and both edges are healthy, because they're going to sell out. And, J.J. McCarthy's been excellent But Ohio State's and Jim Knowles specifically are going to want McCarthy to be the one that beats you. They do not want a repeat of the last 2 years where Michigan was able to bully them in the trenches and move the ball 7-8 yards of play. We'll see. I think this is going to be an Ohio State-Michigan game reminiscent of the 90s when you're looking at just smash-mouth football, line it up, fisticuffs, roll the sleeves up, who's tougher than who. Yeah, because this is in Ann Arbor, because Michigan has so much going around it, that like the support for this team has never been greater because of what's going on. Right now, it's Michigan against the world. So, I think it's going to be a very, very difficult environment for Ohio State to go in there. But I'm taking the hook with Ohio State because they're giving me the 3.5.